1965, Singapore was expelled from Malaysia. No oil, no farmland, no natural resources, not even enough fresh water to supply its own people. Just a humid island, barely larger than a modern city. Most countries begin with something: oil, minerals, vast land, a huge domestic market. Singapore began with none of it, and today it has a higher GDP per capita than the United States. It is one of the world's largest financial hubs. Its passport is among the most powerful globally. Its sovereign funds manage hundreds of billions of dollars. So how does a country with almost no land become one of the richest nations on earth? And more importantly, what's the hidden mechanism behind that success? Because this wasn't luck. It wasn't natural advantage. It was design. When Singapore became independent in 1965, the situation was fragile. Unemployment hovered around 14%. Ethnic tensions simmered. The British military base, which supported thousands of jobs, was preparing to leave. The island had no hinterland, no farms to fall back on, no oil wells waiting to be drilled. It looked economically doomed. At the center of this moment was Lee Kuan Yew. He didn't frame independence as liberation. He framed it as a survival test. His logic was cold and simple. If we cannot rely on resources, we must become indispensable. If we cannot compete on size, we must compete on efficiency. If we cannot sell commodities, we must sell certainty. The first move was geography. Singapore sits along the Strait of Malacca, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. A significant portion of global trade passes through that corridor between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. Most countries tax trade that passes through them. Singapore optimized it. It built one of the most efficient ports in the world. Ships could dock, unload, refuel, and leave faster than almost anywhere else. In global shipping, hours matter. Delays cost millions. Singapore became the place where time was saved. Time saved equals money saved. Money saved attracts volume. Volume creates dominance. But ports alone don't create prosperity. The second move was far more controversial. Instead of protecting local businesses from foreign competition, Singapore invited multinational corporations in. Aggressively, low corporate taxes, clean infrastructure, zero tolerance for corruption, strong contract enforcement, political stability. While other developing nations feared foreign control, Singapore embraced foreign capital as fuel. American tech firms, Japanese manufacturers, European chemical companies, they all set up operations. Factories emerged. Jobs followed. Skills transferred. By the 1980s, Singapore wasn't just assembling cheap goods. It was producing high-value electronics, petrochemicals, and precision engineering components. And here's the important shift. It moved up the value chain deliberately. Low-end manufacturing was never the end goal. It was the training ground. As wages rose, Singapore pivoted into higher tech industries, then into finance, then into advanced services. It was constant economic upgrading. Now here's where the model becomes uniquely Singaporean. The government didn't just regulate markets, it participated in them. Through state-linked investment arms like Temasek Holdings and GIC, Singapore invested globally. Banks, airlines, telecom companies, tech firms, real estate across continents. Instead of relying solely on domestic growth, Singapore bought global exposure. These funds grew into some of the largest sovereign investors in the world. Think about that irony. A country with almost no land became a major owner of assets everywhere else. When other nations argued about free markets versus state control, Singapore treated capitalism like engineering. If it generated returns and reduced national risk, it was worth owning. But the real masterstroke was land policy. Singapore is tiny, roughly 730 square kilometers. Scarcity is permanent, so the government acquired and now owns around 90% of the land. That single decision changed the country's economic structure. When the state owns land, it controls supply. When it controls supply, it influences price. When it influences price, it shapes stability. Instead of letting private speculation dominate housing, Singapore built public housing at scale through the Housing and Development Board. Around 80% of residents live in these apartments, but this isn't social housing in the traditional sense. Citizens buy long-term leases, typically 99 years. They build equity. They can sell under regulated conditions. Property becomes both shelter and investment. The government captures land value appreciation. Citizens gain asset ownership. Speculation is contained. It's a hybrid model. Capitalist ownership layered on top of state-controlled land. Now let's talk about productivity. Singapore's GDP exceeds $400 billion. On land smaller than New York City. That means economic output per square kilometer is extreme. How? Human capital. Education was treated as economic infrastructure. English was adopted as the working language of business. Schools aligned with industrial needs. Technical skills were prioritized. When local talent wasn't enough, immigration filled the gap. Today, roughly 40% of Singapore's population is foreign-born. Engineers, bankers, scientists, entrepreneurs. In a land-scarce economy, brains scale better than territory. But this growth model has consequences. High immigration constrains social cohesion. Rising property prices increase cost of living pressure. Economic success amplifies inequality, and Singapore is expensive. Car ownership requires a government-issued certificate that can cost tens of thousands of dollars. Housing prices have surged in prime districts. Private education and healthcare add further layers of cost. Scarcity doesn't disappear, it becomes monetized. Now let's address governance. Singapore is often praised for low corruption, efficient bureaucracy, and long-term planning, but political power has remained highly centralized. The ruling party has governed since independence. Media regulations are strict. Public order laws are firm. Investors interpret this as stability. Critics interpret it as constrained political competition. Either way, the result has been predictable policymaking. Predictability lowers risk. Lower risk attracts capital. Capital increases asset values. By the 2000s, Singapore evolved into a global wealth hub. Asian fortunes flowed in. Family offices multiplied. Private banks expanded operations. It became a preferred base for managing regional capital. Money seeks safe jurisdictions with rule of law and tax efficiency. Singapore offered both, but no system is immune to pressure. First, demographics. Singapore's birth rate is among the lowest in the world. An aging population means fewer workers supporting more retirees. Productivity must rise just to maintain balance. Second, external dependence. Singapore's economy is deeply tied to global trade and financial flows. If global trade slows or geopolitical tensions disrupt shipping lanes, the impact would be immediate. Third, competition. Other cities are copying elements of the model. Low taxes, financial services, strategic geography, capital-friendly policies. The moat is narrowing. And then there's the technological shift. Digital finance reduces the need for physical hubs. Remote work reduces geographic advantage. Supply chains are diversifying away from single choke points. Singapore built its success on being indispensable to global flows. But what happens if global flows fragment? This is the quiet risk behind the success story. The model works beautifully in an interconnected world. It is less clear how it performs in a fractured one. And yet, for nearly 6 decades, Singapore has shown an unusual ability to adapt, from manufacturing to finance, from labor-intensive industry to capital-intensive services, from vulnerability to leverage. It never relied on one engine alone. That may be its greatest strength. Singapore did not become rich despite having no land. It became rich because it understood what land scarcity forces you to do. Be efficient, be disciplined, be globally relevant. It monetized geography. It monetized stability. It monetized trust. The uncomfortable truth is this: Singapore's wealth is not built on abundance. It is built on control of land, of policy, of risk. And that raises a bigger question. In a world where many countries struggle with debt, political volatility, and resource mismanagement, is Singapore an exception, or is it a blueprint few are willing or able to follow, because turning weakness into strength sounds simple. Executing it for 60 years without losing control, that's something else entirely.